What's going on, guys? Welcome back into the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be giving you every single date that you need to know in regards to the Madden 22 scouting update. Now, what we're addressing here today is every single week in franchise mode that will give you some type of important update to your scouting within Madden 22 under the new scouting update. And this is going to be a comprehensive list all the way from preseason through the draft to show you everything that you need to be looking out for whenever you're looking to scout here in Madden 22. Now, the first thing here in today's video is preseason week 1. That is one of the more important dates here along the timeline. This is whenever you can hire scouts and set their regions. What you want to do is you want to make sure that you have your scouts hired for the positions that you're looking to scout and have a region assigned to them, because you will receive scouting in week 1 of the regular season based on how you have everything set here within the preseason with your scouts. Now, it is incredibly important for you guys to set this up because, like I said, you will receive scouting information based on how you have this set whenever it comes to week 1 of the regular season. The next important date is week 1 of the regular season, because this is when you are able to choose the draft class and you will receive your first round of scouting information. So whenever you approach week 1, you will end up with a pop-up that says choose a draft class. Remember, for all of these pop-ups that we have throughout the season, always select that pop-up and do not select Scout College Players, or it will simulate the pop-up that you have. So I'm going to go ahead and select Choose a Draft Class. For today's video, we're just going to keep an auto-generated draft class, and that is going to set us up with an auto-generated draft class and the scouting based on how we have our scouts set within the first part of the season. So through preseason, we were going to accumulate 20% on all of these players, and then we will have additional scouting based on who our regional scouts are. So you will see here, for example, that we have scouting set for tight ends. We have a level 2 scout scouting tight ends. Whenever we go over to the prospects on our prospect list, you will see that the bonus has been applied to tight ends. We are getting an additional 5% scouting on those players under that position in that region that scout has been assigned to. This is why it's incredibly important that in preseason week 1, you select your scouts accurately and select regions for them to scout in. You will get 20% on every single player and a bonus applied to the various other players. Whenever we go to week 2, which is our next important date here, you will have the ability to select your regional focus for your scouting. Whenever you go under this pop-up, remember to select Choose Regional Scouting Focus. If you delegate, it will simulate it for you. That's just as bad as misclicking into the scouting itself. It will automatically assign these for you. You don't want to do that. You want to set these yourself. Now, there is a point in the season, specifically midway through the season in week 8, where you will be able to select your national scouts focus. You cannot do that at this point. However, you can select your scouting focus for all of your tier 1 and tier 2 scouts. Generally speaking, you're going to want to set this focus to where you get your bonus at. So for example, with this guy that is efficient with left guards and centers, I'm going to select his focus for that position, and you will do that for each one of these positions, selecting a focus for each of these regions so that we can get the most scouting on these players possible. Specifically, the way that you select these is by scrolling over that region, pressing triangle to select position focus, as you can see on the right side, aligning that position focus with where you want it to be focused, and then pressing X again, and that will lock it in, bringing up the success screen showing that the focus position for the scout was assigned. The next important date within franchise mode is going to be week 3, which is where you receive mock draft 1. You will be receiving a total of 5 mock drafts throughout the entirety of the season and the off season, and it will give you a projection throughout the first round of who it believes each team will take and what their positioning will be within the draft. This is very good information to know, as it is going to give you a pretty good idea of where the computer thinks these players stand in terms of of overall and ability, and this information can be extremely useful in determining what other teams may be looking to draft and things of that nature. The next important date is actually going to be week 5 of the regular season, where we are going to receive additional scouting from our position-based scouts. So you will see here that we have now moved up from 25% to 45% on some of our focus players here within the tight end position, for example. And you will see at various other positions that you start to receive some scouting from your various scouts throughout the league. You'll see percentages start to rise, like this one, 39% at cornerback. You will start to get scouting from your scouts during week 5, and that is one of the key points that you actually receive scouting for your players. The next very important date, and one of the most important dates in franchise mode under the new scouting update, is going to be week 7. In week 7, whenever you go to scout your college players, you will receive an additional 20% boost in your percentages for how much these players have been scouted for every single player within the league, within the draft class. So you will see now that all of the players that were at 20% have now bumped up to 40%, and the players that had scouting on them, for example, our tight ends that were already at 45%, have now been boosted up to 65%. Gaining an additional 20% on each player is going to allow you to see various other skills on their card, and that is going to give you a more defined idea of where these players stand in terms of their skills and abilities within the draft class. The next important date here is going to be week 8, the midway point of the season. And in week 8, you are going to have access to mock draft number 2, as well as your national scouting focus. Make sure that the first thing that you select is your national scouting focus. Otherwise, it will delegate it for you. You don't want to risk that. This is going to give you a very important advantage in scouting. For me, I am going to select the D-tackle position because that is where I am getting my bonus. So we are going to select the D-tackle position the exact same way we did with our other regional focuses by pressing triangle on it, and that will now give us our scouting bonus. Additionally, like I said, in week 8, you will also have access to mock draft number 2, which will allow you to compare how things have changed between mock draft number 1 and mock draft number 2. This will give you an updated idea of where teams stand in the draft order and which positions teams are potentially looking to draft within the league. The next important date within our franchise file is going to be our scouting focus in week 11. This is going to allow us to select 3 focus players to receive additional scouting bonus on. I'm going to go to the tight end position, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the top 2 tight ends as well as 1 tight end that I have already gotten additional scouting on. This will give us a good contrast as we go through to see how these players earn additional scouting completion through our scouts and see what the effects are as we complete our scouting. Whenever you are looking to select your 3 focus players, you will simply go in here, pressing X on 3 of them. A check mark will appear next to them, and you will press triangle to confirm. You will get a confirm player selection screen. Are you sure you want to choose the following players for super focus scouting? And then it will list the 3 players that you have selected, and you will select yes or no to confirm. Now, I have found that the 3 focus players are a little bit inconsistent in terms of when you receive the scouting bonus for those players. After week 11, selecting the 3 focus players, it is not consistent from what I have seen in when you will receive the return for those players. In this franchise specifically, I have advanced 1 week and I have received the additional 30% on tight end Max Powell. However, I did not receive any bonus on the other tight ends that I was intending to focus on, and from this point forward until the end of the season, I will generally speaking not get any additional scouting on these players. It's like the scouts die from this point forward until the off season. You will receive no additional scouting. So it's about half of the entire season, including playoffs, that your scouts are essentially inactive and you are not receiving any additional scouting on the players that you are trying to draft coming in this offseason. I have now reached the off season within this franchise, and the only additional scouting that I have gotten is my focus players did finally register. I got my additional 30% on both of the top tight ends and on Chuck Whitfield, the third tight end, bringing him up to 95%. In the other franchise that I tested, I only ever actually received the focus percentage on 2 of the 3 focus players. My third focus player in an additional test never got the additional bonus completion percentage. However, in this franchise, I did get the bonus percentage for all 3. One thing that I will say that we will be looking out for here is to see if these percentages stay at 70 and 95. In various other tests that I have done, these percentages decreased once I hit the offseason and advanced through various stages. With that being said, the next important date for us to remember is offseason re-sign stage, which is where we are going to get our mock draft number 3. So once we go ahead and advance to offseason re-sign phase, this is going to give us access to our 3rd mock draft. This mock draft is going to be the first mock draft under the official draft order, which is going to give you a good idea for where teams stand in the draft order, which is extremely useful. And then it will give you a good idea again of who these teams are looking to take, or positionally which positions these teams probably are going to be needing. The next important date here is going to be off-season free agency week 1, which is where you are going to gain the combine stats for these players. So whenever you select them under their player cards in the scouting department, you will then have the NFL Combine listed under physicals here, and you will finally have access to that. The next important date here is going to be off-season free agency week 2, where we will then get our college pro day results as well as mock draft number 4. In order to access college pro day results, you will simply go to your players. You will be able to select them, and again, under physicals, it will be displayed under college pro day, which is next to the NFL Combine. This is going to show the variance that happens between a player performing at the Combine and performing on their home field. That is going to represent a little bit of a discrepancy, and that will factor into your scouting as you move through. Again, you will then also have access to mock draft number 4, and this mock draft is likely to be very similar to mock draft number 3 because the draft positioning will be exactly the same. However, it will give you a good idea of where things can shake up. For example, with mock draft 3, they have quarterback Hal Saxton going 1 and Xavier Hughes going 3, but in mock draft number 4, they have those 2 players flipped and similar players drafted under them in the same order. So very interesting stuff that comes here once you get to the offseason, but again, we still have not received any additional scouting on our prospects since around week 13. You guys will see that everybody has pretty much stayed at the same percentages. Most of the scouting draft class has stayed at around 40%. It's a little bit bizarre that your scouts are not doing anything between week 11 and the draft. The next important date will be off-season free agency week 3, where you will have the opportunity to have private workouts with these players. See what your scouts have learned about the players you brought in for intensive workouts at the team facility. You will go ahead and select private workouts. You don't want to delegate. Again, like I said, avoid clicking into the scouting prior to this. And what you're going to do is you're going to have access to bring in these guys in for private workouts. So I'm going to bring in 3 different players. We're going to go with Max Powell, Emmanuel Joseph, and Greg Fasano. You're going to press triangle to confirm. It's going to bring up the same type of information that it did before. The information is not going to give you automatic feedback as it has not with the other departments either. You will have to wait in order to get those private workout datas back to you, and that is going to come in week 4. And in off-season free agency week 4, you will obtain the final mock draft as well as your information on your data for those private workouts. So we will then have our final mock draft. And then if we go to our prospects for the 3 that you selected, you will have that private data brought in for them, so you guys can see that brought up tight end Max Powell up to 100%, tight end Emmanuel Joseph up to 100%, and Greg Fasano up to 80%. So what that is telling you is that you are going to get a maximum of 40% on your private workout data. So it's going to give you a boost of 40%, which can be utilized and leveraged for your sake in order to get a 100% completion on certain players. If you do get 100% completion on those players, you will then at the top of the screen have an actual talent projection for that player, which is similar to Madden in prior years. So you guys can see he is projected a round 1 player, but his talent is round 1 to 2. So that is extremely important, because otherwise on players that do not have that, you will have a question mark there and not have a real talent grade for that player. With all that being said, those are the important dates for moving through a franchise under the new scouting update. What I will say is that it is a bit bizarre that you will finish with a majority of the players in the draft class at only around 40% scouted. I would think that the majority of the players would be over half scouted. However, your scouts do not operate past week 11 for the most part. For whatever reason, you do not have scouting for the majority of the season. You will only get scouting on certain focus players. What I will say is that you should focus on the early projections within the draft class, because they will be telling on what the player's true overalls are and where they lie in terms of talent. Generally speaking, early in the season, you will get a good projection for where these players stand. There have been various times where I have viewed these draft classes, and throughout the season, they move very low overall players further up the draft board. There was even a time where a 60 overall right tackle moved up to the number 1 spot on all player lists, and he was a 60 overall when drafted. So pay attention to the early scouting rankings whenever you first get scouting in week 1 of the regular season, because that will be the most accurate information on where to draft the players at. One of the final points that I want to point out to you guys is that you do have access to your scouting in the NFL draft week in the offseason. You did not used to have access to the scouting. You only had access through free agency, and then it would have access to nothing else during the NFL draft week. You now can view your scouting during that week, and then once you start the NFL draft, it will bring up essentially the same exact look that you normally have in the draft here in Madden. Nothing has really changed here, but you're going to have access to your draft board, which is going to be exactly the same as all of the scouting that you have had throughout the season. You can click on the players specifically and take a look at all of the various same information that you've already had. That's all there is to go over in terms of the timeline for scouting within Madden 22. They really did not change that much. It's a little bit of a facelift, if anything, beyond the fact that it's just a facelift. The draft itself, the prospect pool itself, is formatted in the same way that it has always been, and the best players will be at the top of the draft board at week 1 of the regular season, and you will know which players you should be drafting based on their projections at that point. With all that being said, hopefully this information was helpful to you. Make sure you guys leave a like on the video if it was, subscribe to the channel if you're new and want to see more videos like this, comment down below with any information you would like to give or anything you'd like to see next, and I will see you guys in the next video. I hope you have a good one. See ya.